To make up the frames, you're going to need to use the templates in the set here. Now you'll notice we've got 3 because we can make different sizes. We can make A5 using these 2, A6 with these, and if we use this one and this one, we can even make a DL sized envelope. If you're going to make them in a square format, then you're going to use 2 of the same size. But what I want to do is just make a basic frame up to show you today how it all works together, and it really is up to you then to decide what size frame that you want to make. And just quickly show you a couple of examples here. We've got our 2 little A6 frames. Again, I'm using card on this one and a little bit of mirror board on this one here, which really does look effective. I've used the smaller frames here to make that. Okay, so we need to start off. We'll make our choice of templates to work off with, and it's basically the same procedure, whatever you want to work with. Now I'm going to begin with this one here, and just a little bit of card. Now, thickness of card really just depends on what it is that you want to, what you've got to work with. Now, I would recommend something from 160 all the way up to 250. 200, 220 is pretty nice. It's how easy it is to fold, because we've got some little folds to make with this. So that probably will determine the card of your choice. So let's say, for argument's sake, we've got a thin one today, 160 GSM, which is about as thin as you'd want to work. Now, if we've got printed surfaces like this, that's fantastic. We can work with our template and just pop that onto the area that we want. Now, I find it's easier to work on the other side, so I would take my card, flip it over, and possibly mark out where the lines were if I wanted to get some special features in, i.e. the grain of the wood. Now, there's no particular right or wrong on this, but I like to work with the shape looking like this. I find that works pretty well for me. And when I'm working with a template, I also like to just put everything into position with a little bit of tape just to hold it there. So if the doorbell goes or I make a mistake, I can come back and also just check if my lines are there. The first thing I'm going to do is just trace around the edge of the template here to get my outline, and this is the part we're going to cut out, so that will give me my basic cut line. Now, you don't have to be too accurate. You're going to use your ruler to cut this out, but a little bit of accuracy is not a bad thing. It's very, very forgiving, this. Okay, so we've got our outline drawn there. The next thing to do are the fold lines here, and I think the golden rule is always to go from one edge to the other. So when it comes to this part, I find it's important that whatever you choose, that you stick to it. So in this instance, got my template there, I'll just line that back up, and I'm going to go against the top of the line here. So I'm going to push against that one there, and because I've done it there, I'm going to do the same up here on this one, and I'm going to follow through. I'm just going to let the pencil push against the leading edge at the top there, and repeat that for the lines there. These are our score lines, which we're going to use to create our folds. And I can just remove my template now, and we can see that's our outline there. We can see where the tape was held. We're going to cut this out now, so that really doesn't matter that it's there. I would recommend a good craft knife and cut it out like so, using your straight edge. Now you can, if you want to, use scissors, but I think with this, it's these lovely crisp sharp lines are important. I'm going to cheat a little bit here and just, I've got my ruler on an angle there, and then just come along and cut here. Now, as accurately as possible is great, because these are going to be the mitre edges, but as ever, most things that I do, it's all pretty forgiving. So all I'm doing is cutting this out here. Let's get a proper edge like so, and then just work my way around the edge as well. And that gives me my lovely crisp cut lines, as we can see here if I just lift that away. And there we go, that's our basic shape cut out. So the next thing to do will just be to score the lines along here. Now you can use a scoring tool, a little ball tool, they're excellent. I'm going to actually just use the back of my craft knife here. I'm just going to run that along those lines, and that gives me a really sharp, crisp crease line, because that's what we're aiming for here. So like so. So I'm not cutting, I'm simply creasing the card. If you're using 250 GSM card, and a fairly thick card, then you'll find that the thicker creases are really important when it comes to the folding process, because it just makes it a lot easier for you. Okay, they're all done in there now. I'll just flip this over and show you that's the other side on the printed side there. Now when it comes to folding, I'm just work, say, from top to bottom. Pop my ruler down here like so, across that edge, and just bring it up a little bit below the bottom of the line there. We're going to use this ruler as a lever, as it were, if I can lift it up, to pull this up. So there we go, struggling there for a second. So there we go. I don't want to go right on the line, I just want to come before it, and you'll feel it. It starts to crease naturally on the crease line. I can just use my ruler there like so. That just helps me with this. And again, I'm just going to slide my finger underneath here and just pop it a little bit before there, and just literally pull it up against the edge of the ruler there. And that gives me my two lines there. And the same again here. Let's just bring that into shot for you. Ruler just below the pencil line, just exaggerating slightly, and just pull it over. That's being covered there. And then on the last one here, now you might find it easier then to just flip it round. And again, line that up and just pull that. It will naturally fold with the score lines there. Then we can go ahead now and just strengthen everything up. Bone folder could be used at this stage if you want to. And I just carefully, I want to make sure I'm following that line, so just a little bit tentative when I do those creases. Then I know it's happy and everything's there. And there we go, that's our section of the frame ready for gluing. And that's simply going to fold together like so. And this will become the part that we glue. Now you've got a choice here, because we can do a couple of things with this. When it goes down onto the card, you're going to have this as the inside edge. So you may want that on the top and on the outside, depending on what you've got and you're working with. You can have it so that it's underneath and out towards the back, like so. So when it's glued, if I just bring another piece in, just to show you like so, we can see how our frame builds up like that. Then we can use that as our guide. It's really up to you. I find once you glue this and pop it in, we don't really see that edge, but that's something for you to think about. Now, gluing. I'm going to glue along that edge there. I think wet glue is the best thing to use in this instance. And so that's what I would recommend. Just a little bit of wet glue on there, right up to the edge. And pop it on. Now we can use a cocktail stick just to help us pop everything on. So I'm just going to pull this over like so. Just hold it for a second and just make sure everything's lined up nicely, and the glue will begin to take like so. And then at the next stage I can just slide a cocktail stick into there, or something that's flat, just to help push down. So I'm going to pop that over. In this instance I'm going to use my craft knife here and just pop that in, and again on there, and that holds it and just pushes down on the glue and helps with the join. Now the other thing you can do, another little technique, is to actually just flatten it down like this and hold it. That does sort of take the shape out, the crispness of the shape, but it does work very well. So we can hold it like so and then pop it back in and I just push it a little bit the other way just to square it up so we get our lovely frame shape that we can see there, like so. And we're going to go on now and just make 4 of these and use these to create our frame. I've gone on and made 4 frames here, or 4 sections of my frame, ready to make it up. And the next thing to do is to glue it onto our card. Now on this one I've shown you because I rather like this. This is my A5 I'm going to make, a slightly larger one, and my printer here quickly printed it out, didn't go edge to edge unlike the sample that I've got here. But the nice thing with this is when you pop the frame down, it's all going to cover up the edges anyway. So at this stage, when you're ready to glue and make up the frame, I would have your base paper down, or if you're using pattern paper or just printing directly onto the card, it's up to you. But once we build the frame up, it's a bit harder to cut everything and drop it in. So get your basic background layer sorted before you start. Now I always begin with a longer length. There's no rhyme or reason really, there's no right or wrong, but that's just the way I would suggest to start. If you're doing a square one, then obviously they'll both be the same. So at this stage here, I'm just going to put my wet glue on here, and the edges are very, very important here. They're what really anchor it down and stop it sort of peeling up. A little bit in the middle. So I'm just going to scrape this along. Now you can, if you want to, use double-sided tape. That's very strong and works well. What I like about the glue is the wiggle room that you get with it. But do make sure that you do go right up to the edges here. That will make everything look so much nicer. Get a nice firm crease on there, and the first panel goes down, so I line that up with the edge. And again, you can see now why the wet glue's great. I can just slide it in. That should line up perfectly at the top and the bottom there. These will make perfect sized A5 frames, or A6, or square ones, depending on how you're working. So that's my first one down there. And again, we could come back with our cocktail stick, knitting needle, anything which is a little bit long, and just put a little bit of pressure in just to help it dry. So I'll do the same. I'll just come in there. Again, just put a little bit of pressure on there, and that just helps anchor it to the base. You could use that other technique, but it would only work on the first one anyway. So I think at this stage it's useful to have something just slot in there and glue it down. Because we're going to reach the stage where, especially with the last panel, you can't do that. But once you've built this, it's got a bit of strength to it now. I can actually push down on it and help it glue. Okay, so my next panel comes along, and I said no particular rhyme or reason, but I'm going to go for a shorter one here. And again, same technique. Gluing is very important. I get my fingers out of the way, you might even be able to see that edge, the 2 leading edges there and there. I've got my thumb, I'll just move that in a moment. And along here, the ones I want to make sure have got glue on them. And obviously a little bit in the middle. Pop that to one side and line this one up the top here. I'll just bring that down, and you can see we get the lovely mitre edge, and I'll just line that up on my corner there. Don't worry too much about the join here at the moment. We're just making sure everything looks right. It does. It's covered on there, because what I'm going to do is come back and just glue that with a little bit of glue to hold it into position. But as this comes together, it kind of locks in. Now, again, we can pop something in here just to help pop it down and stick a little bit more. You'll find if you just squeeze it and hold it down, you can put quite a bit of pressure onto there, like so. Just let that begin to set. I'm going to show you the corner technique now, but I would normally go on at this stage and glue all 4 into position, like so. They'll just go in position there, and that way you know everything's sort of squared up. But before I do that, let me just come back and show you to the corner here, because you can do them as you go along if you want to, if you sort of makes you feel that it's working a little bit better. Now, so a little bit of glue in here, across those two edges, and this is going to dry clear, so I don't have to worry too much. I'm just going to begin to hold those two edges together, and I can feel it starting to, what I call the glue grabs, it begins to bond, like so. And at this point, before it goes too far, I'm just going to wipe off any excess. Now you can decorate this frame, so don't worry too much, but the neater the job, obviously the better it looks. So now I've scraped the excess off there, removed it onto my towel. Let me just get that in shot and show you now. So it's a little bit laborious at this stage, but I'm just going to let that dry. Just a little bit of pressure pushing on either side. Now if you're going to decorate this, you're not really going to see the join anyway, but this just helps hold it together like so. And I'll just go on now and let that dry, and I'll use that same technique for all the other corners, but you can see it really does look lovely. We've got a perfect mitre joint that will give it the strength as it dries, and I'll use that same technique on the other sections of the frame here. Now while this is just getting ready to dry, I'll just pop a little bit of glue back in there and rub that down as it begins to set. Scrape off the excess. You could use a little bit of removable tape just to hold it into position like so, and that will just enable you to go off, have a cup of tea while it dries. It just holds into position. It really depends on how fast your glue sets. Got a little bit rogue bit of card there, so I'll just mould that in now. Just take off the excess glue, and that can just sit now, and I'll remove that when it's dried. I'm ready now to just do the last panel in here. I've got my cocktail stick, and I can pop that right the way up there and just put a little bit of pressure on if that needed to glue, but that's fine. Last panel here, so again a little bit of glue on there across the edge on the last panel here. A little bit in the middle, just scrape that along there. Oops. And then that's ready just to drop in now, the final one. So we can see there, it just drops in and kind of holds the whole thing together. So I can't put my barbecue stick, knitting needle or craft knife into there, so this is the last one, does have to hold. So again, you'll just pop it down, let that set, give it a couple of minutes to set, and then we can come back and do the same technique here with the corners. We'll just be able to pop a little bit of glue in and just lock everything into position with our frame. And like I did on the other one, we can actually pop a little bit of removable tape if you want to, just to hold it into position, but make sure there's not too much glue there or it's going to stick to the removable tape. Okay, so I'll go on now and so just drop a little line of glue into the corners there and there, let that work in and create my perfect mitre joints. Everything's beginning to dry off nicely now, and I'm just going to show you here on the final corner, if you can see it, I'm just going to remove my tape there, and no dramas. And so it all comes together, and we've got, I think, a really lovely frame around the card. Now, it'll never be absolutely perfect. I used to do picture frames and I want, absolutely crisp edges. I'll tell you what though, it's pretty good for the cardboard. And I just used the thinner card here, the 160 GSM. Slightly thicker, gives you a more sturdy construction, but it does the job and you get a lovely frame. If I sort of tilt that, you can see this wonderful 3D dimension that we've got to our card here. We can then open and pop our greeting inside if we want to as well. And there we go. That's how we make the frame. As I said, we can do them different sizes. You could make square ones, rectangular, DL. It's really up to you. But the same process we're going to use throughout the whole process of making the frame with the individual sections. You just really pull it all together, take your time. Perhaps the trickiest bit is just gluing these little bits here, but once the glue's gone in and set, it goes off pretty well. If you're going to decorate it, put corners or something on it, then it's not so critical. You might find that there's little gaps in there, tiny little gaps, but this is made out of card, although it looks like it's a real wooden frame. You know, I don't think even if you were using real wood, you'd probably get it quite as mitre, as lovely as that sometimes. So there we go. Please don't, you know, over panic. I tend to. I want everything really nice and neat. And from there, as I've mentioned, we could go on and make our cards. We can do smaller frames. We can inset them into the card. And just to recap on here, just to show you on another example, that we can use our Miri board as well. That looks rather nice. And on this sample, we've made a smaller one and just set it inside the card by just making the card slightly bigger, like oversized A6. But it gives you an idea of what you can do with it. Just take your time. I think the secret comes in the cutting, using your stencil, drawing everything accurately, the folds and the creases, and then making your panels up like so, your sections of the frame rather, and then just bringing it all together. So in essence, we're going to use our sections here just to come together and make our mitre joints like so, and they'll be creating our lovely frames for us. Okie dokie, have fun with this project and enjoy your crafting. Bye bye.